Do you want to know how to get free battery life out of your handheld? Are you lazy and don't want to deal with any settings? Don't you even want to set your target FPS while keeping your frame rate smooth and stable? Do you want defaults that work for pretty much anything while still having all the relevant settings exposed in the rare case that anything needs manual tweaking? Do you want to become friends with your neighbor's cat? Then stay with me. In this video I'll tell you what in my opinion is the best auto-TDP tool which can fulfill all those requirements. Except maybe the cat thing. I will show you how to use this tool and where to get it. I will tell you why I like it so much and how it's different from the others, and of course I will show you a few games running with and without this tool. In case you have not heard about this magic auto-TDP thing yet, I will start this video with a brief introduction explaining what it is, why you want to use it and how it works. Before the rise of the AMD 6800U handhelds, what we mainly did to limit and control the power consumption of our systems was to manually set the TDP. So we controlled how much wattage the APU was allowed to draw from the battery. This approach is still valid, it's simple and easy, and some handhelds like the GPD Win Max 2 have a physical button to toggle between different TDP limits. This approach, however, is not ideal and has some downsides. Some games tend to take as much power as they can, so if you set your power ceiling to 20 watt, they will use those 20 watt and draw your battery even if they would run perfectly fine at just 10 watt. The AMD driver does not a great job helping to bring down the power consumption of such games. With the old approach you had to manually set a TDP level at which the game still runs nice and smooth, but does not waste too much power. This approach is especially flawed if you consider games which consists out of situations that require low power to run smoothly and other situations that require a higher power ceiling. To make those games run smoothly, you of course need to set the TDP to the maximum that is ever required. To be fair, most games are not that wasteful and do not use all the power they can get. However, even those games do not run as efficiently as they could. And here is where those auto-TDP algorithms come into place. Opposing to the name, they do not set the TDP directly, but they monitor and control the GPU and the CPU clocks and try to keep them as low as possible. Those tools constantly monitor different parameters of your system and aim to figure out how low they can set the CPU and GPU clocks at any given moment. Such an approach is much more flexible than setting a static TDP once and allows to adapt to different situations. Let's finally look at the different tools. Let's start with Motion Assistant. Motion Assistant is the first one to implement such a thing, and you can start this by setting the optimize GPU flag here. It only does monitor the GPU, and in my opinion there are better tools out there. To be honest, I never used that one. Let's go to the next one. The next one is made by Cyfray, who made this super awesome bat, which is the go-to tool if you want to set any advanced setting on your handheld. How this tool works is that you set a target frame limit you want to achieve, and the tool basically adjusts your CPU and GPU to reach that target. Let's have a look. To start this, you need to press T to open the power bat. If you want to change some of the settings, you have to press O for options. In the settings menu, we can see that we can set the target frame rate, and here we have an upper and a lower bound. So how this works is that it tries to keep your CPU load and your GPU load between 90 and 98%. If your current GPU clock is 1000 MHz, but your game only uses 700 MHz at the current time, then the BUT file reduces the actual GPU clock until it is in a range of 90 to 98% of the target, so that the actual GPU clock is not too high and is not wasting too much power. If we are at the upper limit or above, then the effective GPU clocks will be increased. If we look at more options, you can set this for the GPU and you can set this for the CPU. I will not look into all the other options, as this video should not be an in-depth tutorial about Cypher's BAT. So the way I understand how that BAT works is that each second it checks if the CPU and the GPU are within the set limits, and if that's not the case, the values will be adjusted. Also, it checks the FPS to see if the target is reached. If not, further adjustments can be made. This approach, in my opinion, has two drawbacks. The first one is that we need to know the target frame rate, and the second one is that the algorithm is only able to react to changes, not to predict something. So if we are too low, we increase the clock speed, which might lead to some stuttering if we are right at the edge. Don't get me wrong, Cypher's algorithm is a super valid solution if you want to maximize your battery life. His BAT is fantastic, is one of the best tools we have out there, and if you want a one-stop solution that does it all for you, then go for his BAT, feel good about it. If you want to learn more about it, visit Fog's channel, as he has 2 or 3 videos showcasing this tool. He has it tested and running on the Asus ROG Ally, and I will leave a link to that video in the description. Let's finally come to the main purpose of this video, and that is to introduce the auto-performance script made by Hytice. I will not say his name again, as I have no idea how to pronounce it, and even if I had, I would probably not be able to pronounce it correctly anyways. Let's rather focus on his script, which is also a BAT file. The reason why I like this tool so much is probably because I was involved in the development process quite a bit as a tester. So I got some insights in how this works. I could verify that this tool works with edge cases other auto-TDP tools struggle with, and of course I had enough opportunities to complain whenever I didn't like something. If you have a look at the settings, you will see that there is no option to set the target frame rate, and that is because you don't have to. The algorithm was made so that it works without knowing the target frame rate. So if you want to switch from one game running at 30 FPS to another game running at 40 FPS, you can do that without having to worry about the settings of this auto-performance script. For me, this is a huge quality of life benefit, as I can just start the auto-performance script when I boot my system and load any game later without having to worry about the script. The intention of the author was to make a script which has defaults that work for the vast majority of games, and I can confirm that this is the case. I did not come across a PC game yet which required extensive tinkering to make it work with this script. The only case in which I had to change the settings a bit, just one parameter, was emulation. Yes, this BAT file was made with emulation in mind, and from what I have tested, it handles emulation better than any other auto-performance algorithm out there. later in the video I will show you a PS3 game which benefits greatly from this auto-performance script, and no other algorithm I have tested in the past could handle it. And that is because the algorithm of this script has one magic value, and that is the CPU offset. The CPU offset is the only value I had to adjust to make this script compatible with the emulators I have tested. To understand this value, we first have to understand how this script works and how it's different from the others I have introduced before. Quick recap: Cypher's bet works by setting a target FPS, setting an upper and lower ceiling for the CPU and GPU. It checks those values each second, and if any of those values is off, the CPU and GPU clocks will be adjusted. What this algorithm does different is that it doesn't check a specific target or boundaries for the CPU and GPU and reacts to violations of those. What this algorithm does is that each second it checks a few variables and puts them together into a formula. The formula then outputs the GPU or CPU clock for the next time frame. This formula does always the same, no matter the frame rate or system load. It's quite a simple formula, but the battery savings are very good and the frame rate is super stable. Let's get back to our offset. The offset is a flat number that gets added to the clock speed after all the other calculations are done. This variable is available for the CPU and the GPU. This is a powerful tool which allows you to manually adjust the clock speeds if the results are not good enough and the frame rate is not stable. The offset is not just there for manual tweaking. By default, there's already a little bit of offset set for the GPU and the CPU. Regarding emulation, it's the CPU offset, which is the main value you have to adjust. Even though the defaults were set to work for the vast majority of games, there are situations where you need to do some manual tweaking. Luckily, the tool can store a few of your configurations and you can load them by simply double tapping the number keys. You can find the download link of the auto-performance script in the video description. I recommend to join the GPD Discord server, as there is a dedicated channel for those auto-TDP scripts. The authors of the bet files I have mentioned in this video are on the Discord server, so feel free to bombard them with your questions. The auto-performance tool requires hardware info and RiverTuner statistics server. If you don't know how to get those tools, make sure to watch my other video, which is a tutorial that teaches you how to get this nice overlay I'm using. Let's finally get to some tests. All the tests were recorded on a GPD Win Max 2 with an AMD 6800U processor. My unit has 16 GB of RAM and the TDP was set to 30 Watt.
First, verlieren wir den.
2 days until I get answers. 2 days and I'll know who she was. And why I was cast out at birth. 2 days until I get answers. 2 days and I'll know who she was. And why I was cast out at birth. As if there could be an excuse for that. Mother's heart. 2 more days, and I'll know what it's like in there. It's so many people crammed into one place. I guess no one ever... 2 more days, and I'll know what it's like in there. It's so many people crammed into one place. I guess no one ever gets lonely in there.
Waldläufer sei verflucht. Wenn es wirklich Geistermagie ist, sollten wir uns besser wappnen. Durch, bitte macht schnell. Ich weiß nicht, wie lange wir noch durchhalten.
Ich will auch einen zünftigen Kampf haben.
Den nötigen Tag gesehen. Du kannst uns nicht töten! Das ist das Ende!
一人願いたい。どうしてもというならば、まずわしを撃ってもらおう。
手当てしたくてたまらねえか、ワビスケ。だが俺はこいつら。
忠勝、お前は人知れず無理をしすぎなんだ。頼むからそれ以上。忠勝、そこで安静にしているんだ。必ずお前を癒してみせる。
歯車を回せ。すぐに兵糧をお届けするのだ。歯車を回せ。すぐに兵糧をお届けするのだ。元気になった時に備え、俺らは武具を用意したぞぜ。必要なんだ。
わしをこの世の敵とみなすか。そうかもな。
あったら血も涙もね。おでで、これが絆か。こやつらを放っておけば大変なことになりますぞ。そっちの親分殿へ、こっちの親分がやられました。
At the end, let's have a look at that one game which I used as the ultimate test for the auto-performance algorithm. The game is Samurai Warriors 4 Empires on the PlayStation 3. The game alters between the tactical phase and the combat phase. The power requirements during the strategical phase are much smaller than the power requirements during combat, so that game is a perfect contender for an auto-performance script. Let's first compare the game in its vanilla state versus the game when running the auto-performance script without any tweaking. As you can see, the power savings in the menus and during combat are substantial. Let's see what happens if I hit many enemies at the same time while running the auto-performance script. The sound is broken and the game is not enjoyable in that state. Let's have a look at the frame rate and the CPU usage. The frame rate is at rock solid 30 FPS and the CPU usage is not even 50%. What that means that for an algorithm that either checks the frame rate or the CPU usage, there is no way to detect the broken audio. I got quite a few versions of the auto-performance script which aimed to solve that issue without requiring manual tweaking, but none of them succeeded. Hytice was quite ambitious to create an algorithm which works for pretty much any game without requiring manual tweaking, but it was not possible for that game. To make the auto-performance script compatible with Samurai Warriors 4 Empires, you manually need to increase the CPU offset. That way you can manually increase the CPU clock speed after all the other calculations are already done. Lowering the target CPU utilization is not an option, as the CPU load is only 50%. Let's see what happens if we set the CPU offset to 250.
体の墓場としわしに殺だ。
私から攻めても構わないかしら。
The power consumption during the menus is not much higher as it was when using the default value, which is a CPU offset of 100. During combat, the clocks are higher than with the default offset, but the power consumption is still lower than without running the auto performance script. And that is why I prefer the auto performance script over all the other power saving solutions out there. And that is because it exposes the magic offset value for manual tweaking. If we recap what the auto performance script can do, we will notice that it can run pretty much any PC game I have tested with the default configurations, but works with the hardest edge cases if you slightly tweak the settings. If you are using any of the other auto performance or auto-tdp or however you want to call those scripts, then give that one a try, you won't regret it. If I ever feel like it, I will compare the most popular algorithms out there. That, however, requires a bit of time and I cannot promise when that will happen. Let me know in the comments if that is something you want to see. My final words are those. If you own an AMD 6800U device and feel a little bit sad that there is already a more efficient chip out there, then always keep that in mind. The 6800U APU combined with the auto performance script is more efficient than the 7840 without. At least if I compare the results of my 6800U with the benchmarks of the 7840U I've seen on the internet. Once I get a unit with a 7840U, we will see how big the difference between both is if they both run the auto performance script. That's it for today. This video is much longer than expected and it took me 2 weeks to make it. The auto performance script is a tool which I use pretty much all the time. It deserves a long video and I can 100% recommend it. I hope this was useful for you. If you made it this far, thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye bye!